All right, everybody. My name is Mark Dahlmeyer. I will be the host of the Exceptional Innovation webinar series. The first part of this series is compliance as a service. So thank you all for joining us today. Let me set up the conversation. Uh, Before I set up the conversation, we're going to go through the agenda. So I'm going to set the conversation up today. We're going to talk a little bit about market trends and some research that we've done recently. We're going to talk about the impact of compliance demands and regulatory actions on businesses. We're going to cover some key decisions and some options that organizations have around addressing and dealing with regulatory compliance. And then we're going to introduce you to a new innovative offering that we have around compliance as a service. So let's set the conversation up. So according to the Chubb Cybersecurity Index, which is a fantastic site that tracks global cyber incidents and breaches, the healthcare, manufacturing, business services, public sector, education, and information technology industries have all experienced somewhere between 200% and 3,000% growth in cyber incidents and attacks over the last 24 to 36 months. So what does this mean? Well, what that's caused is a growing number of attacks and breaches across these multiple industry segments has caused a significant amount of regulatory oversight and regulatory rule changes go into effect. And anytime a regulation has a rule change, it creates this trickle down effect where any organization that's trying to adhere to that regulatory compliance or regulatory structure needs to go through the process of updating their systems, their technologies, their policies, their procedures. So everything that they're doing around adhering to that regulation, and that creates a significant amount of costs and resource drain on the organizations. So with a massive number of regulatory changes being made across dozens of different industry segments, how do organizations reduce the risk, cost, and time associated with keeping up with these changes? So based upon the Thomson Reuters regulatory compliance report from last year, the 5 greatest compliance challenges facing organizations today consist of balancing budgets and increasing compliance costs, dealing with the volume of regulatory compliance change, driving demonstrable culture change within the organization, increased personal liability for executives and managers within these regulated industries, and then the implementation and embedding of regulatory changes and a culture of change within these organizations. If you just want to try to get your arms around how much regulatory change is going on in the United States, you can go to reginfo.com. And what reginfo.com, or I'm sorry, reginfo.gov, what this website tracks is the amount of total pending actions in real time across a number of different organizations or entities in the federal government. So what you see uh, next to the star, you have 14 different regulatory actions that are currently being reviewed and voted on by the federal government around the Health and Human Services division of the government. And what Health and Human Services governs and helps manage is HIPAA, the regulatory compliance within healthcare. So this is a really great website to go and review. And again, just to recap, anytime a new regulatory action is voted on and gets passed and implemented, there's a significant amount of downstream change and cost associated for organizations that are trying to adhere to that regulatory compliance. These are some of the top key regulatory challenges in 2021 that were forecasted by KPMG. Significant challenges around organizational change management, around overarching risk management, operational resiliency as compared to or included within cybersecurity. Look, we know that there's a significant growth of cyber attacks and cyber breaches, as we mentioned earlier. There's a significant growth and spike of ransomware and other data breaches since the beginning of the pandemic. I think the last data point that I looked at, there was a 600% growth in cyber attacks since the pandemic began. Just the overarching risk associated with trying to adhere to regulatory compliance, consumer and investor protections. So the government is going out of its way to pass new regulations and new laws to protect consumer and investor information. So, for example, the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. You have the New York State regulation around data privacy and data security. And then you have the SHIELD Act, which is part of that New York Regulation Act. So these are all new regulations that are designed to protect consumer information or personal identifiable information. And organizations that operate in these states or that are holding or storing consumer and customer-based information will be forced to adhere to these regulatory compliance frameworks and to these structures. And then, of course, there's just ongoing expanding regulatory authority. So, for example, GDPR was a new regulation that was launched in the United Kingdom. So within the EU, any EU citizens' information that is stored or used globally, there's a specific security and data protection process and set of regulations to govern and manage and protect that EU citizens' data. So if you're doing any type of commerce or if you're providing any types of goods and services to EU citizens and that information is in your database or they're accessing your websites, then you must adhere to GDPR. And that's a significant cost associated with trying to adhere to that regulatory compliance. Based upon the KPMG report, there are some key takeaways around their analysis and their findings. But change management around regulatory compliance is significant. Again, the volume of regulatory change is increasing. Organizations must be focused on driving that demonstrable culture change, right? The increased personal liability, of course, as we mentioned earlier, and then the implementation and embedding of regulatory compliance changes throughout the organization. I think what you're seeing is some commonalities between the KPMG report and the Thomson Reuters report, and many of these reports are now saying the same things. So massive change, massive dependency on change management, large volume of regulatory changes underway, there's increased personal and professional liability, and then most of these organizations are looking to get their arms around how do we create a culture of change. Within the KPMG report, there were very specific regulatory pressure points, and there were specific technology considerations that they were communicating that needed to be managed. So, for example, custom software development. So how software is being developed, obsolete technologies, organizations trying to deal with the security of systems and data, addressing the appropriate level of people and skills and training and development. There's failed technology strategies, there's third-party technologies and services that you need to take into consideration as you're going through the process of updating your regulatory compliance programs, policies, and procedures, and many others. There are significant pressure points that KPMG pointed out within their report, such as increased integration and improved operational resiliency, a closer partnership between the board and business functions to make sure that strategic initiatives are aligned within the organization, expanding cybersecurity and vulnerability threats resulting from an increased use of digital platforms, integrated platforms, as well as cloud, and then regulatory focus on proprietary data, customer data, and core processes, including third-party vendors and suppliers. So these are all significant pressure points that organizations are trying to get their arms around and deal with as they deal with the growing changes within regulatory compliance. We talked a little bit about the growth of of attacks, cyber attacks, and ransomware, but the average loss per ransomware attack reported was $417,000 in 18. In 2020, it was $783,000 in average damages and losses from a standard ransomware attack. So as you can see, the attacks are growing, the damages and the losses are growing, and this is causing regulators to relook at the regulations, the controls, and relook at the policies and procedures and recommendations. And they're driving the market and organizations within regulated industries to pay more attention to these areas. There's a large impact associated with regulatory compliance and the demands of compliance on businesses. Small to medium-sized businesses pay on average $11,700 per year per employee to address regulatory costs. The average cost of regulations within businesses with less than 50 employees is almost 20% higher than larger organizations. The cost of federal regulations on small to medium-sized businesses in the US is estimated to total over $40 billion annually. 73% of firms surveyed believe regulatory changes will increase the personal liability of their senior managers and leaders. While at the same time, 67% of organizations expect regulatory compliance costs to increase over the next 12 months. And California is the most regulated state with over 395,000 regulatory restrictions. As a comparison, Idaho is the least regulated state with only 38,000 regulatory restrictions. So just to summarize this, managing regulatory compliance change was reported as the top compliance challenge in 2020. 34% of companies report that they're outsourcing some or all of their regulatory compliance, and that's up from 28% the year before. And again, that's from Thomson Reuters, the cost of compliance analysis and report they published in 2020. Here are the realities and the financial impact of regulatory compliance in small businesses. And it varies from industry to industry. For example, 30% of financial services firms expect to spend between 5% and 25% of towards regulatory compliance in 2021. Healthcare, hospitals with 161 beds pay on average $7.6 million in compliance administration per year. 88% of companies expect to spend more than $1 million to achieve and maintain GDPR compliance. Now, the other part of that survey was a large percentage of those also expect to pay over $10 million in the future to maintain that compliance. The National Small Business Association survey respondents expect to actually spend $83,000 in their first year of business if they were opening up a new business on business regulatory compliance. So again, these are significant costs. The costs for compliance are continuing to grow, and a report from the Ponemon Institute found that the average cost of compliance across organizations was over $5 million per year. Now, one of the things about this study, Ponemon Institute surveys thousands of organizations ranging from small early stage companies with less than 10 employees all the way up to Fortune 500. So you can imagine, right, the large degree of separation between regulatory compliance costs for a Fortune 500 versus a small business. But the majority of the participants within these surveys were small and medium-sized business. So there's still a significant amount of cost associated with just maintaining and achieving regulatory compliance within small businesses. Now, take this into consideration. If you're found out of regulatory compliance, or if you do suffer data breaches, or if you are attacked and you do have to disclose that you've lost customer data or you're in violation of regulatory compliance, the fines can be significant. So the average cost of being non-compliant was over 14.5 million for organizations. I already mentioned this earlier, but the California Consumer Privacy Act is a new regulation that went into effect, CCPA for short, and this act was intended to enhance the privacy rights and consumer protection for residents of California. Now, a lot of organizations and people ask, well, what's my risk, right? In terms of HIPAA and healthcare. By the way, you don't have to be a healthcare organization to have a HIPAA violation. If you're a business that's providing goods or services, products or services to the healthcare industry, you are known as a business associate, and healthcare entities should have you sign a business associate agreement, which means that you must adhere to HIPAA in terms of the security and the privacy compliance requirements that HIPAA has. So if you're providing janitorial, business services, manufacturing services, legal, finance services, any other types of services, or if you're selling products to the healthcare industry, and you somehow get access to healthcare information, and that healthcare information is breached, or if you're not controlling, if you're found out of compliance with HIPAA, these are the civil penalty minimums and the civil penalty maximums based upon the violation type. This is an example of PCI, so payment card industry violation types. And violations range from, months. So if you have a violation, if you're found in violation, and if you can cure or remediate that violation and prove that you've done that, anywhere between 1 and 3 months, you're going to pay on average, depending on your merchant level. If you're a merchant level 1, you're going to pay $10,000 a month. If the violation continues to extend, then of course the penalties increase on between months 4 and 6 and months 7 and on. And you can see how rapidly these violations, right, and these costs add up. So this is alphabet soup. When we're talking about regulatory compliance and regulations, we talked about CCPA, we talked about GDPR, right? But based upon the industry that you're in, for example, if you're in manufacturing, there's a new regulation that's being rolled out and enforced by the federal government. So if you're doing any type of contract manufacturing or direct manufacturing for the Department of Defense or federal agencies, you're going to need to adhere to CMMC. And CMMC is based upon NIST 800-171, which is a regulatory compliance framework that was established by the federal government. So, and again, if you're taking credit cards or processing credit cards and storing customer credit card information, you would be required to adhere to PCI compliance. If you're in the healthcare organization, or if you're providing goods and services to the healthcare organization, then you're probably going to need to comply to HIPAA. But again, this is alphabet soup. This is really confusing. And as you begin to get into regulatory compliance frameworks, what you find is there's a massive number of categories that the regulation covers and a massive number of controls that you need to implement within your organization. And every control will require some level of policy, procedure, or activity. So you have to provide evidence that you have policies and procedures in place and that you're managing your business and managing sensitive data and protecting sensitive data and protecting your systems based upon the compliance frameworks that are listed here. So, a lot of organizations take a look at the critical security controls, or the CIS 20, and they start there. Some because of the low number of organizational controls and change impact that the CIS 20 has within its structure. A lot of organizations start with the NIST cybersecurity framework. because again, it's smaller and it has less controls and less families and less categories than some of these other frameworks. But again, to the small, medium-sized business owner, this is alphabet soup. Like most of these regulatory compliance frameworks and just compliance in general, a lot of organizations and a lot of leadership really get wrapped around the axle of trying to figure out, well, how should I be prioritizing regulatory compliance and how much money should I be spending in regulatory compliance? Because candidly, I have customers to serve. I have to make sure that my employees show up to work. I have to make sure that my employees are being taken care of. My customers are being taken care of. I have to make sure that I can pay rent, right? And I can pay my employees. So at the end of the day, this can all be very overwhelming and very consuming. But you've got some decision points to make as a leader. You can delay addressing your regulatory compliance concern or the regulatory compliance demand on your business, and you can stay in denial, right? And what I mean by that is you can say, hey, I'm going to kick the can down the road. I'm not going to make a decision on this until I'm forced to, or until I'm contacted by somebody, or until something happens, and then I'm going to address this. But you know what? The chances of something happening are pretty low. That's absolutely being in denial. That's the highest risk option you have. Cyber criminals, hackers, they don't care how big or how small your organization is. They care about how vulnerable you are and how easily your systems and your networks are to hack. So if any organization that's doing business on the internet has firewalls, has a website, does any type of e-commerce, takes any type of credit card, etc., you're absolutely a target because the cyber criminals and the hackers are trolling the web. They have automated scans across the entire web, and they're looking for vulnerable systems and firewalls and websites, and they will do whatever they need to do to automate those attacks, break into your organization, and steal credentials, plant malware, take your organization for hostage, etc. And that's why the growth of ransomware has been so prevalent, and the growth of phishing and social engineering attacks has been so successful. It's because most organizations are in denial and they think we don't have sensitive information. We don't store customer information. We're not in a regulated industry. So why would anybody want to attack me? Well, they want to attack you because if they can make $100 off you, they will. It's the criminal mindset. Now, there are a lot of templates and toolkits out there. So you can go search for HIPAA tools, HIPAA policies and procedures, PCI tools, PCI policies and procedures. At the end of the day, you saw the last slide. This is alphabet soup. Regulatory compliance is extremely confusing if you're not familiar with how to navigate regulatory compliance and build compliance programs, policies, and procedures. So what you're going to find when you get into this process, if this is the path you're going to take, you're going to do a gap analysis on your organization, and that's going to be confusing because you're not going to be able to really interpret the law or the written language within the regulation as compared to where your business is at. At the end of the day, you still have to be responsible for the corrective action. If you identify a gap, you have no plausible deniability, right? Now you are responsible, you have a fiduciary responsibility to execute a corrective action plan. So again, the burden is still on you. You can deflect and defer. So a lot of organizations outsource credit card processing. They outsource data handling. They're not storing data, right? Everything's in the cloud. So you can deflect the risk, you can attempt to, and you can defer the risk by leveraging cloud providers or third-party processors. And you can go to those organizations and say, hey, I need your compliance attestation. I need your compliance report because the bank or your business partner or your customers are asking for your compliance assessment, for your compliance report. At the end of the day, here's what you'll find. The proof of being compliant is still on you as a business. Even if you're outsourcing IT and you've outsourced credit card processing, and your cloud environment, and you're not storing data locally, and you do have some levels of control, you still have to prove that you're compliant, that your people are following policies and procedures, and they are adhering to the regulation within your industry. So a lot of organizations just choose to take baby steps, meaning they'll find an advisor, they'll find an expert in terms of regulatory compliance, and they'll start by getting some advice, by talking to people about this. That's a fantastic first step. A lot of organizations take that first step and they start running, they start running after that, right? So they're now stepping, they're now running, and they begin to act. So they leverage an advisor or a consulting organization or a services organization to perform a gap analysis or perform an assessment around PCI, GDPR, CCPA, CMMC, right? Alphabet soup. And then they have a clear action plan for what they need to remediate and what they need to go do in order to be regulatory compliant. A lot of organizations have been through this process, and you know what? They've decided they're going to find a cost-effective solution. They're going to find a partner, and they're going to outsource regulatory compliance to that partner or to as many partners as they can. Why? Because of the cost associated with modifying systems, building policies and procedures, updating policies and procedures, addressing the rate of change, right? And the fact that this creates a lack of focus in the organization. So that's why you see, right, over 30%, 34% of organizations are now moving towards outsourcing regulatory compliance overall, as compared to 28% last year. So this is the new innovative offering that Xceptional is introducing into the market. It's called Compliance Manager. So since 2007, Xceptional has built a reputation as a very collaborative, innovative, and proactive managed IT services provider that delivers superior IT, superior security, and compliance solutions, and we help customers to achieve and drive positive business outcomes. So Xceptional's Compliance Manager is a compliance as a service solution that includes quarterly scanning and reporting on various regulations and compliance frameworks, a lot of which we mentioned: CMMC, HIPAA, GDPR, NIST, cybersecurity framework, ISO, as well as base level cybersecurity insurance. So the Compliance Manager solution can be customized to address your unique needs and your unique cybersecurity and compliance frameworks. And it includes an annual subscription to the software and to the appliance. You get access to the Compliance Manager software module. So this is modular. So you can subscribe to the CMMC module or the HIPAA module, or maybe the PCI and the HIPAA module at the same time. So it's a very modular type of solution. We provide a one-time setup. There are quarterly scans and assessment reports that you get as part of this compliance as a service. There's a 1-hour report and review where we go over the reports, the findings, and then detailed remediation recommendations. And the platform and service provides prepackaged policies, procedures, evidence of compliance documents, information that you need as evidence to prove that you're compliant, and then any additional supporting documents or worksheets that the various regulation might need in order for you to provide, again, evidence that you are compliant, that you have a regulatory compliance program in place. So Xceptional Compliance Manager also tracks the implementation of those remediation activities and the corrective actions, and it documents the compliance improvements and that you're adhering to regulatory compliance. So what this does is it takes all of the burden of tracking and reporting against regulatory compliance off of your plate, and it's a fully managed program. So this reduces the risk, cost, and the time associated with managing regulatory compliance and provides valuable support to you during an audit or an assessment process. So these are examples of the various modules that are included within Compliance Manager: cybersecurity insurance, And again, every one of these modules is structured in a very similar way. So you have the compliance manager module, one-time setup, the annual subscription, the module itself. You get the quarterly scans, the assessment report, and then the 1-hour report review and recommendation session. And then you get all of these various assets and reports that differ, again, from module to module, but they also are very specific to the regulation or the use that they're designed to provide. So again, cybersecurity insurance, GDPR, NIST, cybersecurity framework, HIPAA, and CMMC. And this is just a sample list of regulations and compliance frameworks that can be included within the Compliance Manager Managed Services deployment, followed by a summary of what's included within each one of these subscriptions. Now, keep in mind, you can buy Xceptional Compliance Manager or subscribe to that compliance as a service through a monthly reoccurring fee. And you can consume that or subscribe to that service a la carte, standalone, or you can bundle it into another one of our managed services solutions through Xceptional Care. So Xceptional Care is a portfolio of managed services that Xceptional provides. So it includes operational monitoring, service request processing. We can customize the managed service to address your business needs, your requirements, and the needs of your customers and your employees. We provide ongoing reporting, analytics, and board reports, board briefings. We go through a process of performance optimization, and then we include issue management and issue resolution. So a lot of these managed services that span help desk, managed infrastructure, so managed server, storage, networking, managed telephone, managed telephony, managed cloud. So again, this is the core structure of our Xceptional Care managed services, and we have a wide variety and wide portfolio of these managed services, which compliance as a service is now a part of. So Xceptional has been known to provide a portfolio of proactive managed services and superior IT consulting services since its inception in 2007. We provide remote and on-site managed services that fit any budget and any scheduling or resource need. And again, I mentioned some of this. So managed desktops, managed help desk, managed network, phone, applications, security, and compliance. We provide access to 24/7 monitoring support that's supported by live engineers that are highly responsive and committed to your business. We also provide virtual CIO services. We perform quarterly technology reviews and reporting solutions that address and support IT strategic planning. So we can update these things based upon your standard service levels and ensure that your service levels and your expectations are being met. We also provide advanced IT consulting, advisory, architecture, and procurement services. So any organization that's trying to go through the process of making sure that their IT, their business applications, and their infrastructure is aligned to their current state of their business, their current goals, objectives, and direction, we oftentimes help organizations to align their applications and align their technologies, their cybersecurity and compliance programs to where their business is going in the future. So just in summary, organizations are re-entering the market and moving beyond the pandemic. They're looking for ways to contain and reduce cost, and they're looking for areas of the business to invest in that will provide them tangible returns. Most executives and companies that we speak with on a daily basis want to reduce the risk and compliance complexities within their organizations, but based upon the glut of vendors and partners in the marketplace, they really don't know who to turn to or where to turn. Let's face it, the amount of time, energy, effort, and cost and resource required to keep IT systems, business applications, IT programs, cybersecurity and compliance programs all aligned with the business, that's a significant lift. don't do it alone. Xceptional is here to help. So as a leading award-winning provider of managed IT services, networking, security, and compliance solutions, Xceptional is committed to helping customers align their IT systems and applications to the current needs of their business, their employees, and their customers. So embrace the Xceptional experience today. Visit our website at xceptional.com or reach out via our Contact Us page. We hope you have the ability to tap into our resources page where we have a variety of ebooks. We have a number of executive panels and a number of great guides in terms of evaluating and selecting MSSPs, evaluating and selecting IT vendors, as well as how to accelerate the value and return on IT investments. So take a look at these free services. Reach out to us to request a complimentary network assessment or security assessment. We look forward to hearing from you soon.